तो सर की एक अलग से करा के रख दी और एक तेरे पास है सिंगल पेज है सर
10-10 पेज।
बैठो जय जय जय
कल आया था क्या? इनको सुबह वो एथिक्स वाला 2 मोटा लड़के वो दोनों आए थे, ट्विंस आए थे ना सुबह? हाँ सुबह
टेस्ट के लिए सर उनको कंफर्म करने डाउट था उन्हें टेस्ट का।
अच्छा अच्छा।
वो कहते थे हमारी क्लास है सर तो हम मतलब दे नहीं पाएंगे या डिस्कशन का भी इशू आएगा। वो तो बोल दिया हमने इतना बैकअप नहीं है हमारे पास।
उन क्लास तो 1 बजे से
टेस्ट लिखने उसका 1 बजे डिस्कस अभी तो आए थे दोबारा
इनको पीछे बैठ गए बंदे
60 तो हो गए सर मुश्किल होगा। जो अपने दोनों टेस्ट में आ रहा है सर ये रैंक लाएगा देखिएगा।
फिर बात करो
5 मेज दिए सर 5 मेज दिए एक इंटरव्यू दिए वो ग्रेजुएटर भी है ना टेस्ट करते सब बहुत बढ़िया
So yesterday we have seen the first part of the economic survey. So today let us look at the second part of economic survey, and then we will also see the budget, what the budget has to say about the problems faced by the economy. As I said, that economic survey had come out with various solutions. Some of the solutions were there in the budget, and most of them were not there in the budget also. So what are the problems and what are the solutions, we will see. So we will look at all the aspects related to economy, related to finances, then related to industrialization, then infrastructure, then agriculture, then monetary situation, prices, interest rates and everything else. Then external sector, and then social sector. We'll look at all these problems, and then we'll try to find the solutions to all these problems. So what economic survey had to say about all these things? So starting with the finances, fiscal policies, starting with the fiscal policies, starting with the fiscal situation of our country. So basically the survey says that global developments, global economy is having a major impact on our the domestic economy also. This global economy, it is having a major impact on domestic economy also. It says that in 2017 global output growth was 3.8%. 2018 it had come down to 3.6% global GDP, and for the current year 2019 it is expected to come down to further 3.4%. For the current year it will come down again to 3.4%. So obviously this deceleration in the global growth rates, global GDP will be having an adverse impact on our economy also. That is what we said. Yesterday we talked about so many challenges faced by Indian economy. One of the important challenges is this global economic developments, and the problem here is that we don't have any control over these global economic developments. India has no control because our contribution to global GDP and global trade is so less that it does not really matter what we do. It is so less. So then coming back to the domestic financial situation, what does the economic survey says? It says that if you look at the domestic financial situation in terms of the revenues and expenditure, in terms of the deficits, domestic financial situation in terms of revenues and expenditure, in terms of deficits, definitely for the year 2018-19, 2017-18, that is the last year, 2018-19, what happened was we have seen a decline in revenues as well as expenditure, a decline in the revenues as well as expenditure, and there is a lot of controversy related to this decline also. Yesterday in Parliament also, Lok Sabha also, our finance minister, she said that what are the statistics provided by the government were right, but there are some people who have raised authenticity and who have raised questions about the authenticity of the figures provided by the by the budget. Why? Because the budget document had come out with different figures, whereas the economic survey had given different figures. In India, it is the CGS, Comptroller General of Accounts, he is responsible for maintenance of accounts. So what economic survey has done is that it has taken the statistics from CGA, Comptroller General of Accounts, and it is called PA, Provisional Accounts. Okay. Whereas in the budget that was presented, the revised estimates were completely different. The revised estimates were different from the provisional accounts. They are much more real because this is what CGA had said. Budget is all about estimations. It is about future estimations. Obviously, they cannot be right. And yesterday, when the matter was raised in Lok Sabha, our finance minister has said that the differences in the estimates is because of the different parameters they have selected for calculating this expenditure, different base year periods also. So that is the different thing. So let us not get into all those things because that's not required for us from our examination point of view. What is needed from our examination point of view, what is needed from our understanding of the economy point of view is what are the major fiscal developments that have taken place in the past few years. So what economic survey says is that we are expected to grow at around 6.8% per annum. That is what it said in 2018-19. In 2018-19, the growth rate would be around 6.8% per annum. And it has said that in terms of fiscal consolidation, the fiscal deficit we are expected to contain it around 3.4% of our GDP. 3.4%, and we are expected to reduce it further to 3.3% of our GDP. Further reduce it to 3.3% of our GDP. Basically, this is strictly according to the provisions of what we call FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, wherein the government has said that it would reduce its fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP over a period of time, and revenue deficit to 0%. But revenue deficit the government is not talking about, because it is not possible for the government to reduce revenue deficit to 0. That is the reason why they are talking about reducing the at least fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP, at least in the medium term. That is what medium term fiscal policy statement also talked about. So how can you reduce the fiscal deficit? That is what the question. These are the questions that are normally asked in our Indian economic paper. Deficit financing, how can you reduce the fiscal deficit? This can be done by increasing the revenues and by reducing the expenditure. This can be done by increasing that is what economic survey says also. The government is planning to reduce the revenue, this fiscal deficit, by increasing the revenues and reducing the expenditure. And what is happening here? When you talk about revenues here, tax revenues and non-tax revenues. Tax revenues and non-tax revenues. And what happened in last year? These tax revenues had come down, both direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. GST collections are also very less. It was not what it was expected by the government. What is the reason why tax revenues will come down? The reason why tax revenues will be coming down is because of decline in GDP growth. That is what we call in economics tax buoyancy. GDP growth rate had come down. Obviously, it had a major impact on tax revenues also. The second reason economic survey says they had come down because of the concessions that the government had given in GST, in a rationalization of GST structures, which led to shortfall in tax revenues of the government also. Third reason why economic survey has said the tax revenues had come down, because this income tax department will be reimbursing the taxes also, because if I pay more taxes than what I should be paying, at the end of the year they will be calculating how much I have paid in advanced tax also people will be paying, and how much I should be paying. Then the income tax department will give tax refunds. And what economic survey says is that this tax refunds also have increased in the last year. That resulted in overall decline in tax revenues. Tax refunds also have increased. This is what happened. In case of non-tax revenues, the major source of non-tax revenues for the government has been in the last few years is user charges. Basically, the money that the government charges from the people for the services it is providing. And the problem with these user charges is there is huge amount of subsidy that is given. Huge amount of subsidy given by the government. And what economic survey says is that apart from this, another source of revenue for the government is this one, disinvestment proceeds. Another source of revenue for the government is disinvestment proceeds. And another source of revenue for the government is the dividends paid by RBI. Dividends paid by RBI. The non-tax receipts had come down because last year the dividends paid by RBI also had come down. That is what economic survey says. Last year the dividends paid by RBI also had come down, because of which there is a what you call reduction in tax revenues of the non-tax revenues of the government. And overall, we could not achieve the targets we had set for ourselves in the budget in terms of tax revenues. We could not realize the targets. And obviously what happens? It will have an impact on expenditure also. So when the revenues come down, if expenditures were to remain the same, what happens? The deficit will go up. So the government also had reduced the expenditure. Correspondingly, it had reduced the expenditure also. What did the government do? Economic survey says that the expenditure of the government in recent times, in the last 3-4 years, there is qualitative change in the expenditure of the government. What is that qualitative change that we are talking about? Now, the expenditure of the government, we can divide that into revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. And the qualitative change that we are talking about here is that in the last few years, the revenue expenditure of the government is coming down. The revenue expenditure of the government is coming down. And the capital expenditure is going up. That is what economic survey says. Why the revenue expenditure is coming down? So when you look at the components of the revenue expenditure, you have interest payments, you have subsidies, you have defense expenditure, and you also have a public administration expenditure. That is government expenditure on salaries, pensions and everything else. Public administration expenditure. So what the survey is saying is that interest payments you cannot do much with it. Why? Because you have to pay the interest, and of course when the government is taking more loans, it has to pay more interest rate also. And the major reduction in revenue expenditure was seen in the subsidies. That is what economic survey says. The major reduction could be seen in subsidies. And what kind of subsidies? The subsidies, almost 95% of reduction in subsidies expenditure was due to deregulation of petroleum prices. That is what the survey says. In our subsidies, we have different kinds of subsidies given by the government. Food subsidies and non-food subsidies. Subsidies on rice, wheat and other subsidies, and then you have subsidies on agricultural products, subsidies to farmers, and then petroleum subsidies. What the survey says is that these petroleum subsidies have come down drastically. Why? Because the government had taken the decision to fix the petroleum prices on a day-to-day basis without giving any subsidy. So obviously it has reduced a huge amount of burden on the part of the government. It had reduced huge amount of burden on the part of the government as far as subsidies are concerned. And what the government has said is that this reduction in revenue expenditure was used to finance capital expenditure. This reduction in revenue expenditure was used to finance capital expenditure. And in the coming budgets, the economic survey says, the government also says that their objective is to further reduce revenue expenditure and focus more on capital expenditure. Their objective is to reduce further revenue expenditure and focus on capital expenditure. Next, this is what when it comes to about the fiscal aspects of the government in terms of revenues and expenditure. Now, what is the outlook for the future? What are the problems and what could be the solutions? What is the outlook for the future in terms of fiscal developments? Shall we be able to control our fiscal deficits? More importantly, revenue deficits. Increase our spending on capital expenditure. Expand our tax base and improve our tax revenues. These are all the things which we have to see. So economic survey says that going into the next financial year, this is what the government is going to face in terms of challenges. What is it? First of all, slowing down of economy. What we call the dreaded word recession. Nobody is talking about this recession now publicly, but everyone has this fear that from stagnation we might be going into recession. From stagnation we might be going into recession. Already the signs are there. What is the sign here? Especially manufacturing sector, the growth rate is not picking up. Consumer demand is not picking up. Global economic conditions are also not favorable. So economic survey says that whatever the future budget estimates about revenues, expenditure and deficits depend crucial factor. Here depend on this crucial factor. How economy is going to perform in the next financial year, in the coming financial year. And to give credit to the finance minister, what she has done in the budget is that she did not come out with any outrageous estimates related to revenues and expenditures in the budget. Her estimates were very modest. She was not looking for 18, 19, 20% increase in nominal increase in the revenues. She was looking at around 13%, 12% increase in revenues, which is which is not difficult. But again, the problem here is that with inflation very low, you can increase the revenues only through increase in GDP growth rates. And for that you have to ensure 8% growth rate. And the last quarter growth rate was 5.8%. And today or tomorrow this IIP also will come, Index of Industrial Production also. Again, people are expecting something not favorable in the form of decline in manufacturing activities also. So economic survey says that the first major hurdle to realize the fiscal objectives of the government is the slowdown that the economy is experiencing, and more importantly, what is going to happen in the future, both the domestic as well as external sectors. The second problem it talks about is the next problem is it says that this one these petroleum prices, global crude prices. Global crude prices. For example, in the last financial year, they have increased by $14 per barrel in the last financial year. It has completely played havoc with our economy, because Indian economy is closely related to these global crude prices. Because of this increase in global crude prices, our current account deficit also had reached 2.4%, which was almost 0% 4 years back. Current account deficit also reached, if not dangerous, significant proportions, because we still have good amount of foreign exchange reserves. But if these global crude prices increase, they go up, it will automatically increase the subsidy burden. Why? Because government cannot transfer all the entire increase in the prices of crude to the customers. That will further decelerate economy. And if the government has to finance the subsidies, again the revenue expenditure of the government will go up, revenue deficit will go up. Second major headwind according to economic survey is these global crude prices. In the next 1 year, budget says that they are hoping that the prices will come down. Budgetary document that was prepared by Ministry of Finance, it has said that they are expecting the global crude prices to come down in the coming financial year, whereas economic survey says that they might go up. Why? Because if there is any kind of slight recovery in the global economy, automatically there will be more increase in demand for crude products, there is crude oil products. Obviously it will increase their prices also. So it is what we call a double-edged sword for us. Deceleration in global economy is impacting our GDP. If the global economy starts accelerating, it will automatically result in increase in global crude prices. Again, it will have a negative impact on our economy. Either way, as I keep on saying, beggars will always suffer. So this is second problem. The third problem that economic survey says is that again GST revenues. There is every likelihood of shortfall in GST revenues. That is what economic survey says. We cannot simply sit back and think that this is what we are going to get as part of GST. If you look at again the last month, GST revenues have seen shortfall compared to the previous months. And why do these GST revenues will be coming down? Why do they come down? When there is no trade activity. Government will get tax revenues, these GST revenues only when there is trade and business. When the volume of trade is coming down, obviously it will also reduce your GST revenues also. This is another major bottleneck that is economic survey thinks. Third one is another problem that economic survey sees is in terms of our fourth one is the welfareist approach of the government, welfareism. What is this welfareist approach of the government? Recently, just before the elections, government had come out with a scheme called a Kisan Samman scheme, KSN, what is the acronyms? Our Prime Minister is very good at coming out with all these acronyms. I don't have either the patience or intelligence to understand all those things. So about all these things. This for this money transfer to the farmers as part of this Kisan scheme. 75,000 crores of rupees of money is required. Obviously, it will increase your revenue deficits and fiscal deficits. And then we also have schemes like Ayushman Bharat, which again require huge amount of funding. This again will have a negative impact on our balance sheet. As if this is not sufficient, the government will come out with more schemes also. Why? Because again, in the next 3-4 months, we have state elections also. So before elections, you have to come out with a new scheme. And when the government comes out with these welfare schemes, automatically your revenue expenditure will go up. That is what another problem that economic survey talked about. The next problem is what we call the elephant in the room. Nobody is talking about. That is Finance Commission recommendations. 15th Finance Commission recommendations. They will be implemented from the year 2020. When these Finance Commission recommendations are implemented, automatically there will be more devolution of finances to the state governments. And when the more money is given to the state governments, obviously the money with the central government will be less. The money in the hands of the central government will be less. It means the deficits will be very high. This is another problem that economic survey talks about. These are the major fiscal challenges that we will be facing in the coming financial year. As a part of the budget, we will see whether the budget has answered any of these problems or not. These are the major challenges to control our deficits. So from fiscal policies, we can move on to the monetary policies. From fiscal, we can move on to monetary management. That is what the survey says. So what does it say? So what we have done is that in the last 3 years, we have made significant changes in our monetary policy. We had come out with what is called MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, to fix the interest rates, the repo rates as well as repo rates, to ensure stability and certainty. As we have discussed yesterday, one of the major problems is policy uncertainty. To avoid this policy uncertainty, we have come out with this solution called MPC, Monetary Policy Committee. What do? They will look at the functioning of macroeconomic variables. On the basis of that, they will decide the interest rates in a more transparent manner. And even the industry also will come to know about what kind of changes that would be taking place in interest rates. And what happened in the last few years, because of a drastic reduction in inflation rates, inflation had come down drastically. Yesterday, as our finance minister was saying in the floor of the house, food inflation almost has reached 0%, which is what you call incredible. It has come down drastically. Since inflation had come down, what the RBI had done is that it had eased what you call these repo rates and reverse repo rates. They have come down significantly in the last few years. What is the problem here? Even though they have come down significantly in the last few years, the problem here is at the global level, we have to make a comparison with other countries. At the global level, the interest rates are very, very low compared to the interest rates in India. For example, what is the present repo rate? 5.5%? Yes, 5.75%. But if you look at the interest rates in Germany or in America, in Germany they are 0%. In fact, they are negative. Real rate of interest is negative. That is what? In America, they are almost 1%. In India, 5.5%, 5.75%. This is what RBI will be lending to commercial banks. When it comes to the investors, the interest rates will be much higher. It will be much higher. So what the problem here is that India is still what the survey calls a high cost economy. We are still a very high cost economy. Why we are still a high cost economy? Why? Because the very high rates of interest. Even though RBI, along with the government, are planning to cut down the rates, it takes a lot of time before we reach global levels. It adversely impacts our export capabilities also, the capabilities of our exporters because of high cost economy. And then, if you look at RBI monetary policy in the last few years, RBI monetary policy is what we call cautious. They are extremely cautious in reducing the interest rates. They are not what you call dynamic. They are not willing to take chances. They are not willing to do something new. Extremely conservative. Like Indian cricket team. Yesterday they lost because they were very conservative. You should be at least you should do something out of box. Then only you can win. If you play conservatively, you lose conservatively. That is what with RBI also. RBI is very conservative in terms of its fixing interest rates. The moment they see any sign of inflation, then they will increase the repo rates and reverse repo rates. When the inflation is coming down, they are not dynamic enough to bring down these rates. What is the ideal rate of ideal repo rate in India? It should be around 3%. Ideal rate should be around 3%. With inflation, our real rate of interest will be almost 0. With 3% inflation, the real rate of interest will be 0. That is what at the global level at this point of time. But RBI is not willing to take these kind of bold steps. Why? Because all these RBI governors are former bureaucrats, and in bureaucracy they are used to only working in a very traditional manner. That is the problem here. So when we look at the monetary situation in the country, the problem here is that this private sector because of the high interest rates are not willing to take fresh loans also. Another problem here is that in the last 1 year or so, RBI has reduced repo rates and reverse repo rates, but the problem is that commercial banks have not transferred them to customers, investors. What did the commercial banks do? They started making profits rather than transferring them. And RBI has no control over the functioning of commercial banks here. They can only suggest to commercial banks that you please reduce the rates. Except SBI for some some time. Rest of the commercial banks never really bothered to reduce the interest rates. By the time it had come to the customers, it was exactly the same as it was before. This is another problem. Continuing with this monetary system, look at the prices, inflation. Why it has come down? Why inflation has come down? What is the reason why it has come down? Is there any overproduction? Then why it has come down? Inflation has come down, as economic survey says, because of decline in demand. It has come down because of decline in demand. So when you talk about demand, what is this? We talk about two types of demand: consumption demand and investment demand. Consumption demand in economy and investment demand. And what the survey says is that consumption demand had come down in the last 1 year or so because of decline in rural incomes. This consumption demand had come down because of decline in rural incomes. And why rural incomes have declined? Why? Because agricultural productivity has come down. Agricultural productivity has come down. Because 3 years back, minus 6%. Later, minus 6%, then 2%, 4%. Then it has come down to 2.5%. This year again, agriculture is not looking very, very good condition. This decline in rural incomes because of decline in agricultural activity had ultimately resulted in decline in consumption demand. Another reason why, again what economic survey says is that there is a change in the pattern also, demand pattern also in the economy. What is the change that we have noticed here? The change here is that people are moving away from the necessities to comforts and luxuries. They are moving away from necessities to comforts and luxuries. So what we study in economics theory, in economic theory we say that the demand for these necessities is what is called inelastic. That means whatever may be the price, the demand will always be there. What are the necessities? Roti, kapda or makan, food, clothing and housing. This is what you require for you to survive. Whatever may be the prices, the demand will be there. Can you stop eating just because the prices have gone up? No, you cannot. Whereas in case of luxuries and comforts, they are mostly price elastic and income elastic. And that is what the survey says. And what is happening here is that in India, in the last few years, we have moved towards comforts and luxuries. And that is the reason why we can see so much of variation in the demand here. Because in case of comforts and luxuries, people will look at them only when they have incomes. And another problem here is that, if you look at the case of comforts and luxuries, they are what you call durable goods. They are durable goods. So their demand is, not continuous in nature. All this is purely economics, nothing else. Their demand is, this is what we call microeconomics. Their demand is purely what is called, there is no continuous demand for them because they are durable goods. For example, today you have purchased a color television. Tomorrow in the market a new television will come after 1 month. Will you buy it? Obviously not. Of course, if it is a mobile, you will buy it. New mobile. That's a different thing. Because you want to be smart. You can become smart only when you have smartphone. So that is what. But otherwise, in rural areas, what is happening is that in case of durable goods, the life cycle is at least 4 to 6 years. In the case of durable goods, the life cycle is at least 4 to 6 years. That means if you are buying today now, after 4 or 6 years, you will think about replacing it with something else or buying a new one. So what happened is that when the demand in our economy has shifted from necessities to comforts and luxuries, obviously it has impacted the aggregate demand, overall demand. Why? Because people are not willing to go into the market and buy these things. For example, if you are buying a car today, you will not buy a new model that comes tomorrow into the market. Obviously not. And this car you will be keeping for at least 4 to 5 years before you go for the new one. And that is the reason why we can see some kind of stagnation. This is what we say about middle income countries, middle income societies, where you cannot keep on changing your preferences every day once you have a stable life pattern. And that is what is happening in India at this point of time. That is the reason why there is less demand for these kind of consumer durables. And that is what economic survey says. Coming to the investment demand, coming back to the investment demand, as we had discussed yesterday, when do the producers demand Investment funds, we talked about so many reasons. First of all, it depends on the interest rates. The second one is the demand for their products, and then the market capacity utilization and other things. Now, what is happening is that right now, Indian economy is experiencing what you call slowdown. We are experiencing slowdown. Not only Indian economy is experiencing slowdown, but also at the global level also, it is experiencing slowdown. Not only this, most of the countries around the world are opting for protectionism. So there is neither what we call domestic demand nor external demand, because of which the investment is coming down. Investment is coming down. When you go back, to the golden age of our development between 2003 and 2011, at that point of time, we had very high savings and high investment rates, 38%, 37%. That used to be savings and investment rates. Now, even 30% also, we think that it is really great. Why? Because, as I said, a slowdown, deceleration, thanks to global as well as domestic factors. So this is what economic survey is talking about. There is no investment demand also. And what economic survey says is that, especially for a country like India, it must have very high savings rate as well as investment rates. We must have very high savings rate as well as investment rates. Why should we have a high savings rate and investment rates? Why? Because our ICOR is very high, incremental capital output ratio is very high. So that is the reason why we need a very high savings rate and investment rates compared to developed countries. Now, if you look at it again, the savings rate is also not going up. Why the savings rate is not going up? What is the reason why the savings rate is not going up in the economy? When do people save? They will save only when there is surplus. That is what we say in economics, y equal to C plus S or y equal to C plus I. That means your income is equal to consumption plus savings. Your income is equal to consumption plus saving. So you will save only when some money is left with you for after consumption. If you look at the poor people as well as middle class sections, what happened is that in the last 2.5 or 3 years or so, the government kept on increasing the prices of petroleum and diesel products. They kept on increasing the petroleum and diesel products. And what is the consequence here? The consequence here is that the savings had come down with the people. Why? Because they are spending a lot more money on this, a lot more money on travel, lot more money on diesel and other things. And obviously, it also impacts the overall inflation also. And the government is in a catch-22 situation here. People will save only when their disposable incomes are very high. But the disposable incomes are not very high because of the rest of the factors. And that is another reason why the savings rate is also not high. Next, continuing with this, when you look at the financial system again, monetary system, in recent times, there is slowdown because of the supply side factors also. Till now we have seen demand side factors. There is slowdown because of supply side factors also, because of the failure of banking system. So if you look at the financial system of our country, what can we say? At the top you have RBI. At the top you have RBI. Below that you have commercial banks, scheduled banks, public sector banks, and then private banks and everyone else. Then below them you have this cooperative banks and everyone else. Then parallelly you also have NBFCs, non-banking financial companies, NBFCs. So, what is the purpose? You know, we have to understand the reasons for financial crisis. That is the reason why we have to look at all these things. So, what happened in the recent times in the past? We require huge amount of money for investment. You know, there is no dispute regarding the fact that you require huge amount of money for investment. This investment will be made either by the government or by the private sector. Government investment will come in the form of capital expenditure. Government investment will come in the form of capital expenditure, which is part of the budget, which is very, very less thanks to the tight fiscal situation faced by the government. And the private investment, private sector investment depends on various factors. It depends on the factors that we have discussed earlier. So, private sector, what they do is that they take loans from commercial banks. In recent times, what happened is that we had a huge amount of projects in the infrastructure sector. Large number of projects in the infrastructure sector. And what is the problem with this projects in the infrastructure sector? The gestation period is very long. The gestation period is very long. So, what they must require is, they require what is called long-term loans. They require long-term loans. And banking sector, thanks to the financial crisis faced by our banking sector in the past few years, they simply did not have money to lend it to the private sector, especially for long-term purposes. They don't have the money. Then what did the private sector in India do? What did they do? They had approached NBFCs. They had approached non-banking financial institutions, non-banking financial companies. And one of the most prominent among them was IL&FS. They had approached them. But the problem with these NBFCs is that they give only short-term funds. Why the financial crisis? That is what you have to understand, because this is what exactly you have to write in the examination also. Because the question definitely will be asked in your Indian economy this year. The problem here is that they give mostly funds for short-term purposes, and the private sector require long-term loans. Right? The mismatch here. Short-term and long-term. So what they have done is that these NBFCs, they said that you take loan from us today, and then we keep on extending that loan. And if you want fresh loans, what NBFCs have done is that they have approached commercial banks to give them more loans on long-term purpose, for long-term purposes. They took loans from the commercial banks, and these loans were again further lent to the infrastructure sector. What happened in case of this IL&FS? They have taken loans from the commercial banks also, so that they can again, in order to lend to these things. Then what happened? RBI some time back had come out with what is called PCA. What is this? Prompt corrective action. So it has asked the commercial banks to identify NPAs. The period of NPA was also reduced. When do you call a particular loan NPA? Now 90 days, 180 days. Earlier it was 90 days. RBI had reduced. So what happened? All these loans which they have taken, all of them had become NPAs. The loans taken by the infrastructure companies had become NPAs within a short period of time. They had become a short period of time. So what did commercial banks do? Commercial banks started putting pressure on the NBFCs. Commercial banks started putting pressure on the infrastructure companies. They said that you repay the loans, otherwise our NPAs are increasing. They started approaching these infrastructure companies You will immediately start repaying the loans, otherwise, if it will be turned into NPS. And what did these infrastructure companies do? These infrastructure companies again approached IL and FS. You can see the vicious cycle here. They approached IL and FS. Give us short-term loans. Give us short-term loans to pay to commercial banks. Give us short-term loans so that we can pay them to the commercial banks. And what did the ILF and FS, what they have done? They took again money from commercial banks. And they gave it again it went to the commercial banks. That is what happened. And then what happened after some period of time? This has continued for some period of time. After some point of time, what happened? This ILF and IL and FS, they have raised their hands in defeat, saying that we cannot give the loans because all their loans had become NPAs. Now, when the government says that we have reduced the NPAs of commercial banks, how? By destroying these financial institutions. IL and FS, it had more than 1 lakh crores of what you call non-performing assets, NPAs. So finally, the scapegoat was identified as these NBFCs. When IL and FS had declared bankruptcy, suddenly it had jolted the entire financial system. Why? Because it is a completely web of relationships which nobody could understand. Nobody could understand. But everyone knew that there is some kind of serious problem in our banking system. RBI, as usual, is always like a common citizen of the country. When someone comes out with this kind of a PNB scams, RBI says that we don't know this kind of scam can take place also. It is a big surprise for us. RBI is so innocent, you like them, for their innocence. So this is what happened in the financial system. When this IL and FS had collapsed, it had triggered again the negative vicious cycle. So what happened is that these infrastructure companies, they were not able to repay the loans. This is where again we talk about what is called twin balance sheet problem. Everything is related here. Twin balance sheet problem. One is the commercial banks are having huge amount of NPS. Second one is the companies also are having negative balance sheets. They are also having negative balance sheets. Twin balance sheet problem. Added to that, to complicate the matters, in between we have NBFCs also. We have non-banking financial institutions also. And because of all these things combined together, what happened? It had resulted in slowdown of our economy. Industry is not looking for fresh loans. They are not looking for fresh loans because they have so much of past loans, past baggage is there. That is what last year economic survey also talks about. Evergreening of loans is taking place because they have invested huge amount of money in those infrastructure projects. They are not able to come out of it. They could not complete the project on time. Why? Because of various problems. Environmental clearances are not there. State governments are creating more problems. Land acquisition is a big problem. So all of them combined together created a situation wherein you cannot either move forward or go back. You cannot continue with the projects. You cannot get out of the projects. You cannot move forward with the projects. And the money, lakhs of crores of rupees of money was struck here, because of which these financial institutions also had collapsed, because of which commercial banks also faced serious problems. They also faced serious problems. And then later the government came out with certain solutions. Let us see what are the solutions that the government had come out with. The government had come out with two important solutions. One is for companies, second one is for banks. One is for companies and second one is for banks. The first one for companies, for these industries, the government had come out with solution in the form of ISBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. It had come out in the form of ISBC. And what is this ISBC? Those those companies, those industries which have a huge amount of NPS with the commercial banks, which have huge amount of non-performing assets. They will be automatically referred to this arbitrators, regulators. As part of ISBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the government had appointed certain professionals, financial sector professionals, to oversee the proceedings related to bankruptcy. For example, I have huge amount of NPS running into say 10,000 crores of rupees. Then this professional will come and see what can be done with my organization. Can it be revived or not? If it cannot be revived, how can the bank recover its finances, its loans? How can the bank recover its loans? So that is where the arbitrators had come into the picture. And fortunately for the government, this ISBC has really worked wonders. In the last 1 year or so, if you look at what the economic survey says, all these statistics are there in the economic survey. What it has said is that because of this ISBC, the government had been able to solve so many cases related to NPS. I will just give you the statistics also. It says that the first case under IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, first case was admitted in January 2017. Because again, as I said, this year definitely the question will come in your Indian economy. The first case was admitted in January 2017, and till now, as of now, around 14,000 applications were filed till February 2019. 14,000 applications were filed under IBC. And out of this, 150 cases were closed. 152 cases were closed. 91 cases were withdrawn because they settled among themselves. 378 resulted in liquidation. And 383 opted for voluntary liquidation. Opted for voluntary liquidation. So what is happening here is that when all these companies were referred to IBC for arbitration, normally when you approach judiciary, as we have discussed yesterday, the time lag is very long, gestation period is very long. This IBC, it is taking not more than 6 to 8 months for disposing a particular case. And we have this National Company Law Tribunal, NCLT, which will look into all these cases. The good thing about NCLT is that it has all the professionals from the financial sector and legal background combined together. So it will help in coming out with a final settlement. For example, I am the owner of a particular company, and I have debts of around 10,000 crores. Now, what the this tribunals tells me is that there are two things. If you want to revive, you can revive. We can help you. You can retain the ownership also. On the other hand, if you think that you cannot revive the company, then you have to lose your ownership. And also, we will start this arbitration proceedings, wherein we will evaluate the total value of your assets. We will sell them the assets in the public, and then whatever left, the banks will recover their amount. Whatever left, it will be given to you. It is as simple as that one. That is what previous economic survey says. Earlier we had socialism with restricted entry. Now we have capitalism with restricted exit. We should move towards capitalism with complete free exit, and that is what this IBC has done. One of the major successes of the present government is in terms of this IBC. What it has done is that it has brought in behavioral changes also, as we discussed yesterday. Most of the companies that are having NPS are voluntarily coming forward to resolve the issues. Earlier, all the companies, what do? Whenever they have huge amount of NPS, banks will ask them, they will not repay their money. Then the matter will go to the court. The proceedings will start and it will never end. Now with the IBC, they are coming out in a voluntary manner to settle the disputes. And according to the government, whether this figure is right or not, the government says that the commercial banks have recovered almost 4 lakh crores of rupees of NPS through this proceedings. I am very doubtful about this figure, but when the government says that, we will accept it. Commercial banks have recovered this 4 lakh crores of rupees of NPS. And the government also says that thanks to this IBC and other things, the NPS of public sector banks had come down by 1 lakh crores in the last 1 year. The NPS had come down by 1 lakh crores. So this is what we say in terms of what we call the financial sector. And then there are still problems in case of IBC. What are the problems here? There are companies which are what we call multinational. You have branches in other countries also. Obviously, when you are starting these insolvency proceedings, you must take into consideration the laws of other countries also. That is also one problem. Next thing is that there are some companies which are held by a group of people, board of directors. Then you have to take into consideration their opinion. It becomes difficult because some of them will say that we will go for insolvency proceedings. Some other will say that no, we will not. That is what another problem also. And there are problems related to individual owned companies also. That is what economic survey says. But overall, the survey says that definitely this IBC has improved the financial system. But still the problem remains about these NBFCs. That is where we talk about budget. What the budget has to say about those NBFCs. Next, moving forward, as I said, definitely this year you can expect the question. You can explain with the help of the diagram, as I said, RBI, commercial banks, and then parallel NBFCs, and then investors, how it has become a vicious cycle there, which resulted in twin balance sheet syndrome. That is what you say. Next, I think inflation and prices, we already have seen it. Prices we have seen. Next, the next thing that economic survey talks about is sustainable development and climate change. That is, this is not purely economy, it is related to your, yes. Banks part the solution, as I said that once the companies insolvency proceedings started, automatically the NPS of banks also had come down. So next thing we are talking about is sustainable development. What is about sustainable development? That is what we talk about SDG, Sustainable Development Goals 2030. 17 of them are there. 17 of them are there. And what do they focus on? Removing poverty, and then universal education, health, sanitation, drinking water, protecting the ecological systems, and all those stupid goals. Okay. We call them as sustainable development goals. Okay. So that is what we say. Now the question that we are asking here is, what is India's progress in achieving these sustainable development goals? What is the progress that we have made? For that we need to have some statistics here. This is what it was estimated that the world requires at least $7 trillion per year. It requires at least $7 trillion per year to finance these sustainable development goals. $7 trillion per year to finance sustainable development goals. Out of this, $3.9 trillion is needed exclusively for developing nations. Is exclusively needed for developing nations. And what is the present situation? At present, developing countries are investing around $1.4 trillion. $1.4 trillion. So what is the deficit here? $2.5 trillion. So the question here is, from where we can get this money? $2.5 trillion. Who will finance this? $2.5 trillion means almost equal to our GDP. From where can we get this money? That is the basic issue. The most important hurdle in achieving realizing the SDGs is finances. From where we can get the money. Now coming back to India, what are the steps taken by the government to realize the sustainable development goals? Coming back to India, what are the steps taken by the government? The government had launched so many programs. What are the programs? Starting with SBA, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, then Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and then Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, because Prime Minister's Awas, every day we will listen to him, his Man Ki Baat. Okay, so I said Man Ki Baat, don't understand something. Okay. Next, we have Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Then we have Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. And we also have Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. And what these are the schemes that are implemented by the government to realize sustainable development goals, 17 of them. Please remember, for your mains examination, in all papers of your GS, those 17 goals are very, very important. Whenever you are in doubt about writing answers, you always say that sustainable development goals. Whether it will be achieved or not, your development will be sustained. Okay, very, very important. So coming back here, Niti Aayog, what Niti Aayog has done is that it has started ranking the state governments in terms of realizing sustainable development goals. In terms of realizing sustainable development goals. And what it has done is that it has come out with a composite index. And what are the states that are really performing well? It says that Kerala is one of the states which is performing really well. Kerala is the topmost state, and followed by Himachal Pradesh. And Himachal Pradesh has done really well in providing clean drinking water as well as sanitation. Of course, recently Simla faced severe water crisis. That we don't take into consideration. Okay, you know that recently Shimla faced a severe water crisis, but we don't take into consideration because what Niti Aayog says is very important for us. Okay, if you go and ask the people of Shimla, we say that you are lying because Niti Aayog says that you have done very well. Okay, that's why we say that lies, damn lies, and government statistics. So this is what. And what are the worst performing states? You don't have to tell. You know what are they. Starting with Uttar Pradesh and then Bihar. Okay. That is what the worst performing states it says. Next, what else is there? It talks about efficient utilization of energy as part of sustainable development goals. Energy efficient utilization and reduction in the consumption of plastic. reduction in the consumption of plastic. And it also talks about reducing air pollution. PM 2.5 and PM 10. Reducing air pollution. I want you to read this whole chapter of economic survey. The chapter is sustainable development and climate change, because you can expect the questions in General Studies paper 1, 2, 3, even 4 also as part of case studies. That is the reason why if I have to dictate, I have to dictate everything, which I don't think is necessary. I expect you to read the whole chapter. That is what we say. Next, moving on, come to the external sector. Then next one economic survey talks about is external sector. As I said, when Indian economy was growing at 9% per annum, our exports were almost at 28%. So obviously, this performance of external sector is extremely important to realize the objectives of 8 to 9% growth rate. What is happening to the external sector in recent times? As we have said, in the last 1 year, the current account deficit has increased to 2.4% from 1.8%. Why this current account deficit had increased? Thanks to increase in global crude prices. In the last 1 year, global crude prices went up by $14 per barrel. That is the reason why we have seen a huge amount of increase in external deficit. Next, trade deficit also had widened in the last 1 year from 6% to 6.7%. 6.7%. On the other hand, what happened? India has improved on its public debt. Public debt situation has improved. Our public debt situation has improved. So, and what about our foreign exchange reserves? Around 420, that is what economic survey says. Now it has increased. Economic survey says $422 billion. It says that $422 billion. And as we have mentioned earlier, the global output as well as global trade had come down in the last 3 years. It had come down from 3.8% to 3.6% and further to 3.4%. Obviously, it had a major impact on our external trade also. Next, according to WTO, the growth in world trade, global trade in 2018 will be at 3%. Global trade will be 3%. And what was it in 2017? 4.6%. In 2017, it was 4.6%. So as you can see here, the basic problem is deceleration in global trade as well as global output. So what the country can do, or what the country should do? What can we do with this deceleration? Apart from this, what are the other major headwinds here? Next one is, as we discussed yesterday, protectionism. After 2008 financial crisis, most of the countries in the world had opted for protectionist policies. They had opted for protectionist policies. And the next problem here is, the continuous trade dispute between US and China. The trade disputes between US and China. Another problem, as we have said, is the expectations regarding increase in global crude prices also. Next problem is ineffectiveness of WTO. WTO was not at all effective. WTO was not at all effective as the arbitrator of the disputes between the member nations, because of they don't have any real powers. So that is under these circumstances, what can we expect in the future? What can we expect? So obviously what we can say that for the coming financial year, that is 2019-20, you can expect further decline in our external trade. Further decline in our external trade. And only thing is that what you have to do is that you have to focus on the areas where we can, where we have what David Ricardo called it as a relative advantage. We have to identify those sectors where we have a relative advantage over others. And what is happening is that for some point of time last year, Indian rupee has strengthened against dollar and other currencies also. We are talking about relatively with our competitors, because of which what happened, our exports are also become less competitive. Added to that, what the government has done, government started imposing tariffs on imports, and especially it has impacted external sector also. Why? Because this external sector, those manufacturing industries which export their commodities to the foreign countries, when they started importing these products from other countries, their cost of production had increased, and that made their products also less competitive in the international market. It has made them less competitive. And of course, inflation in India still higher than other countries. That is where we talk about the real effective exchange rates. Real effective exchange rates also are not in favor of India. That also had impacted our what you call global our trade also, trade exports as well as imports. Now what did the government do in the last 1 year to facilitate exports? It has said that economic survey has said that the government has signed so many agreements. Since WTO had become ineffective, it has signed so many agreements, regional trading agreements with other countries. Mostly it says that it has signed agreement with ASEAN countries, then Latin American countries, then we also are discussing with Canada under NAFTA, North America Free Trade Organization, like this. So the government had realized that since WTO is not effective at all, let us have more customs unions, let us have more trade unions. But still the outlook is not what you call optimistic. It is not fully optimistic. And then as the outlook, the economic survey says that when can we expect some kind of improvement in the global trade and global finances? First one is the monetary policy of developed countries. For example, America's this Federal Reserve Bank, if it tightens its monetary policies, then it will impact liquidity in developing economies. So the economic survey says that the accommodative monetary policy of developed countries is key to revive global trade and economy. They must be a little bit more liberal. Will they be? That we don't know. Second one is the efforts made by US and China to resolve their disputes. The disputes, if they continue for longer periods of time, it will only impact rest of the world. Next, we have to look at our own policies also. That is, the government must allow FDI, more FDI in at least export oriented industries, more FDI, which the government has taken as part of the budget also. This is what Next one is, of course, the global crude prices. The global crude prices. So this is what economic survey says as far as external trade is concerned. At present, what we can say, we are not really worried about the current account deficit. 2.4% is not that much dangerous, because India is one of those countries which have a very huge amount of foreign exchange reserves. So it is not really a problem area for us. But if it continues for a longer period of time, then we will have to look at it. Already the rupee is also depreciating. The problem with the rupee depreciation is that it might benefit the exporters in the short term, but in the long term it will impact your trade negatively, because your imports will become costlier, your cost of production will increase, inflation will be high, again your exports will become less competitive. That is the vicious cycle that we have to prevent. Yes. If global economy is slowing down,
How export will become competition?
what we are saying here is that when the global economy is slowing down, we have to to increase our exports, we have to make our exports competitive. See, even if a global economy is slowing down, there will be still demand for exports from countries around the world. For example, India and Bangladesh, both of us are producing jute products. America is importing jute from these countries. When can India increase its exports to America, the jute products? When we can offer the same jute to America at prices less than Bangladesh. That is what is making competitive. Yes.
The solutions provided are basically related to external market, global market. It's very less we can do.
Yeah, that is what we cannot do anything. Beggars cannot be choosers. Remember this and you will have peace of mind. What can we do? India, what is our contribution to global trade? What is contribution? 3%. It is not 3%. I think it is hovering around 2.75%, I think. 2.5 or 2.75. Whether India exists or not, for the rest of the world, it does not really matter. Yes? Yes or no? Yes, beggars, that is what. So we cannot do anything. We can expect that everything will be fine. Narendra Modi will become a good person. That is what we can do. So that is what we have to do. Yes, accommodative monetary policy. That is what I am saying. If the developed countries, have some kind of, what you call, give some kind of freedom to their investors, domestic investors, in terms of investing in foreign countries, by reducing their interest rates or by increasing their interest rates, then it becomes easier. When do American investor come and invest in our markets? When does he come and invest in our markets? And why do he come and invest in our markets? Because by investing in our markets, he can expect to get a good amount of rate of return. On the other hand, if Federal Reserve Bank increases the interest rates, what will he do? He will go back to America. And what will happen to India? Beggars. That is what. That is the reason why we are asking America to be little bit more accommodative. We can only beg. Between 1950s and 1990s, we were begging for aid and loans. Now we are begging for trade. But the profession remains the same. That is okay. So coming back here, let us move on to the next chapter, that is agriculture. So what does economic survey says? Now if you look at the performance of agriculture, you can see it is it varies over a period of time, cyclical. Sometimes the output will be high, sometimes it will be going down. So in 2014-15, economic survey says that we have seen a 6.3% growth in agriculture, 2014-15, 6.3%. And by 2018-19, it had come down to 2.9%. It had come down to 2.9%. And in between, it had seen negative growth also. Negative growth also. It had seen negative growth also. So, obviously, this growth in agriculture is extremely important for us. Why? Even though the contribution of agriculture and the rest of the private sector to our GDP is not significant, it has come down over a period of time. Right now it is around 14.7%. 14.7%. But the problem here is that still 49% of our population depend on agriculture. So agriculture will impact our GDP. It will impact our GDP in two ways, from demand side as well as from supply side. Supply side in terms of food output. Demand side in terms of agricultural incomes, which create a demand for other products. So it impacts from demand side and supply side, and most importantly, it provides employment to 49% of our population. So obviously, you can say that the overall growth and development of the country is closely related to agriculture. Overall growth and development of the country. And what we can see is that in the last few years, our agriculture is facing severe crisis. Make no mistake about it, it is facing severe crisis. The crises are because of what we call structural issues. What are the structural issues that we are talking about in the agriculture sector? Please remember, last year in your Indian economy, 3 questions out of 10 were only from agriculture. This is perhaps the most important topic of our entire Indian economy, general studies. And obviously, you can definitely expect one essay on agrarian crisis also. I think it was asked also, agrarian crisis. Last year only itself, or before last year it was asked? Yes, it was asked. So, we have to understand what exactly the problem here in the agriculture sector. What are the problems, structural issues? First one is small size of land holdings. The first problem is small size of land holdings. Second one is fragmentation of land holdings. Not only they are very small, further fragmentation of land holdings. Third problem is irrigation. Even 70 years of independence also, we could only provide irrigation facilities to 45% of our land. Remaining 55% depend on monsoon for their survival. Next, fourth problem is proportion of small and marginal farmers is very high. Proportion of small and marginal farmers is very high. What is the percentage of them? 89%, I think. 89%. Small and marginal farmers. Small and marginal farmers means less than 1 hectare of land. Yes. Then, what is the next problem? Next problem is low productivity. Low productivity. For example, take the case of China and India, make a comparison. The amount of, if you take the amount of land under cultivation in China as X, and their output is Y. In India, the amount of land is 2x, twice the amount of land that China has under cultivation. But our output is half of Y. Why? Because productivity is very, very less. Productivity is very less. Low productivity in our agriculture sector. Next problem is about this fertilizers and chemicals. The problem is with the NPK ratio. NPK ratio. The ideal NPK ratio is 4:2:1. In India it is? Yes. 8:4:1, I think. 1. 8:4:1. Highly skewed NPK ratio. And that is what economic survey also pointed out. It has said that it has reduced the productivity of the soil also. Next problem with our agriculture is absence of marketing facilities. Most of the product, if you take the case of perishable commodities like fruits, vegetables, almost 50% of the output do not 50, 80% of the output do not come to the market. Why? Because we don't have what we call warehousing facilities or proper storage and warehousing and marketing facilities. Next problem is with our agriculture sector is agricultural credit. Again, the statistics is there. 60% of our small and marginal farmers are out of formal banking system. They are not part of formal banking system. 60% of our small and marginal farmers. They take loans only from money lenders. They take loan from money lenders. Next problem is that public investment in agriculture is coming down. Public investment in agriculture. Public investment means government investment in agriculture is coming down. Why public investment in agriculture is coming down? Because of increased subsidy component. Government is spending more on providing subsidies. Government is focusing on more on political populism. Investment is coming down and subsidies are going up. Subsidies are going up. Next problem is this, as part of, we talk about marketing, APMCs, agriculture, price marketing committees. They have monopoly and they would not let small and marginal farmers to get any profit. That is the problem. Most of the product will not come to the APMCs. This will be brought by middlemen by paying small amount of money to the producers. They make huge amount of profits. Next problem with the agriculture sector is regarding the use of technology in genetically modified crops. Here we are talking about BT cotton, BT brinjal, genetically modified crops. This technology. Next problem with agriculture, whatever may be the number, I don't know whatever it may be. After 10 it has come 8, like you people only. I cannot count more than 10. And I can easily become the finance minister of the country, because that is what the qualification. You should not know simple numbers. If you look at the budget, that is what it looks like. I was reading the other day I was reading economic survey, and at one page I was struck for almost 3 hours. Why? Because the statistics that are given next to each other are completely different from what they should be. There is no consistency, because when you are a student of economics and statistics, you try to go into these micro details, and that is where I was struck. Then after that, I later in the night I was watching a television, and in NDTV there was a program about every day they talk about reality at around 8:30 in the NDTV. They talked about the same thing, the mismatch between the statistics. So then I realized that I could become easily the finance minister. So if you don't know, that is the reason why today also I have seen somewhere that UPSC is thinking of scrapping CSAT. I can see so much of happiness on your faces. Right? So another problem, as we said, is that BT brinjal and BT cotton. Next problem is that agriculture is in which list? State list. Lack of coordination between the center and states also. Lack of coordination between the center and the states. Another problem with agriculture sector is this lack of coordination between the center and states. Next problem with is MSPs, minimum support price. What did the government do? It has increased the minimum support price. But the problem is that, as last year's economic survey pointed out, this MSP benefits only 6% of farmers. It benefits only 6% of farmers. And who are those farmers? Farmers from rich states like Punjab, Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. Whereas farmers from, say, in Eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar or Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh, they don't even know that there is something called MSP. They know about MSY, Mulayam Singh Yadav. But they don't know about MSP. That is where the problem is. So, and these are all the problems faced by agriculture sector. And what are the solutions? And of course, in recent times, all these problems combined together had resulted in farmer suicides. Farmer suicides. In recent times, we have seen the suicides of farmers. In almost all states, we can see suicides. And what is the response of the government? What is the response of the government? The government neither has the time, nor patience, nor finances to look into the structural problems. So what did the government have said? We will give 6,000 rupees to farmers. And economic survey talked about creative solutions like what is called zero budget natural farming. What is this zero budget natural farming? That means you are not using any fertilizers or chemicals or any artificial ingredients. This is also what we call organic farming. Organic farming. Why it is called zero budget? Because you are not spending any money on buying these. You are not spending any money on buying these fertilizers or chemicals or anything else. But the problem remains the same. It remains the same. What the government should be doing? It must increase public investment in agriculture. And what is the public investment in agriculture? How can the government invest in agriculture, which is considered to be a completely private activity? What can the government do to invest in agriculture? The government can invest in agriculture in terms of improving the roads, so that farmers can get the product from the paddy fields to the APMC markets, transportation facilities. And the government can invest in storage facilities, especially cold storage. Government can invest in warehousing facilities. This is where the government can be doing a lot. Government can invest in improving irrigation facilities, especially micro irrigation facilities. This is where you expect the government, and the government can also balance this NPK ratio also by increasing the prices of potassium, so that NPK ratio will go back to the levels. And most importantly, the government should cut down on fertilizer subsidies. Who gets all these fertilizer subsidies? For example, last year the government had spent around 70,000 crores on fertilizer subsidies, out of which only 14,000 crores went into the hands of farmers. Remaining 56,000 crores were given to inefficient public sector enterprises. It must reduce this one. Inefficient public sector enterprises. Does the government have the necessary will to close down them? And another problem here is that the food security. The question about food security. As part of food security, right to food, the government is holding a huge amount of food grains than what is necessary under Food Security Act also. Because of which FCI, Food Corporation of India, had become highly inefficient and corrupt. The basic problem is with Food Corporation of India. Does the government have the guts to close down FCI? This is what Shantakumar committee has recommended. And make radical changes to PDS. Will the government do all the things? Obviously, it requires huge amount of political will. Our Prime Minister is in favor of public sector enterprises. He is in favor of the public sector enterprises, even if they are incurring losses. As I said that yesterday, even though BJP is called a rightist party, in terms of its policies, it is much more leftist and socialist than socialist parties can never imagine also. That is where the problem. The government has to bite the bullet. If not today, tomorrow, it has to take the things. You cannot depend. Again, if you look at this year's budget, what did the government do? It had allotted around 1.45 lakh crores for agriculture sector. This is the amount of allocation. And out of this, 75,000 crores were only given for this scheme, Kisan. And what is the amount of money that is left? Around 70,000 crores. Is 70,000 crores enough? Obviously not. That is the reason why one of the major criticisms against this year's budget is that it has not given sufficient amount of monies for agriculture sector. And the objective of the government is to double farmers' income in 5 years. It has said that doubling farmers' income in 5 years, but never said what are those 5 years. Is it from 2014 to 2019 or 3025 to 3050? It said that we want to double the farmers' income in 5 years. If you have to double the farmers' income in 5 years, how can you double the farmers' income in 5 years? Either by providing better prices for their products, or by increasing output, or by improving their productivity. What did the government do? It has not done any of these things. Agriculture sector still faces many problems, and economic survey so stupid it is that economic survey says that the most important agrarian reform that is required is this organic farming, as if everyone is looking for it. Going beyond common sense. Next, another thing economic survey talks about is extension services. That is very important. Agricultural extension services. What are these extension services for in the agriculture sector? Organic farming. That is what we say. Next, after agriculture, we have to move towards industry and infrastructure. Industry and infrastructure. What does economic survey says? It says that India has 133 crore population. Our population is 133 crores. And industrial growth rate in 2018-19 was 3.6%. Industrial growth rate was 3.6%. In 2017-18, it was 4.4%. 4.4%. And the core industries, how many industries are there in the core sector? Yes, 8 industries are there. They have witnessed 4.3% growth. The core industries had witnessed 4.3% growth. And India has also done on these economic indices, indicators like ease of doing business index. We have improved our ranking, and then also global competitive index also we have improved our ranking. So we have improved our ranking from 100 to 77. This is what we say. This is what the good thing we can talk about our industrial sector. Only 2-3 lines, right? Now what is the problem? There are so many problems. What are the problems? As we have said, the problems is with the stagnation, especially manufacturing sector. Manufacturing sector is not progressing. Why? Because it is one sector that is labor intensive, which can provide more jobs also. It is not progressing, and the only sectors that were doing well was this construction, housing sectors. They were doing well during this period, construction and housing sectors. And what economic survey says is that startups also are doing well. Startups, they are also doing well. The government had come out with this program, Startup India, Stand Up India, Go to Hell India, like this. So many programs they had come out with. This Startup India and Stand Up India. We already have implemented Stand Up India successfully. After demonetization, everyone are asked to stand in lines. Stand Up India. Okay. So these programs, they have said that it has said that the Startup India has done really well. And then FDI, we have received around $44 billion of FDI. $44 billion of FDI. And as we have discussed yesterday, what was the problem is that the problem is with small scale industries. Why? Because the small scale industries which had become very old, they are abusing and misusing the protection that was given to them. And that is the reason why we have said that these dwarfs should be replaced with startups. All those benefits which we are giving to the small scale industry should be given to the MSMEs, especially those medium and small scale industries which have come up in recent times as part of Startup India. And we also have said that we must implement labor reforms also. Labor reforms also should be implemented. And again, some of these things are prominently there in your General Studies Indian Economy paper. For example, infrastructure, power, and then you have petroleum, natural gas, housing, urban infrastructure. All of them are there in your communications. Economic survey, this topic on industry has given all the statistics. I expect you to go through them because they can ask any questions about those things. There is not much there because they have given what was the past performance and what is the present performance and what could be the problems. Problems are the same for every industry. In general, if you know the problem for one industry, you can write the same thing for every industry. What are the problems? As we have said, too many controls, in spite of improving the ease of doing business, and then lack of credit, absolute lack of credit because of the twin balance sheet problems, and then sluggish demand, then high cost of production, and then rigid labor laws. These are all the generic problems which every industry faces. Next, come to the services sector. What is economic services? It says that the service sector has it has recorded a 7.5% growth rate in 2018-19. It has recorded 7.5% growth rate in 2018-19, which was less than 8.1% growth. Which was less than 8.1% growth it has recorded in 2017-18. And this service sector contributes, at present, according to economic survey, contribution of service sector to our GDP is 54%. 54%. Within the service sector, there are some sectors, some industries which have done well, which have not done well. What are the industries which have not done well? Tourism, we have seen decline in tourism. Trade, hotels, transport, communication, and broadcasting, television, private television also. There we have seen deceleration, whereas real estate, financial and professional have seen acceleration. Real estate, financial and professional services have seen acceleration. And in India's, according to United Nations statistics, India is 7th in terms of GDP. Now it has improved to 6th position, and 9th in terms of service sector. 9th in terms of service sector in 2017. And India has the second fastest growing service sector in the world. We have the second fastest growing service sector in the world after China. After China. We have the second fastest growing service sector. And the rest of the things are not that much important. The question this year can be about tourism. Tourism has a huge amount of potential. Why tourism is not In fact, the number of tourists who are coming to India this year they have decreased compared to the previous year also. The question can be about that one. Otherwise, not much can be asked from service sector. They can ask about specific sectors like software or other things. They can ask. Next, the last topic is social infrastructure, employment and human development. As I said, in a sustainable development agenda for 2030, social sector, what we are talking about is sustainable development goals. There are 17 sustainable development goals and 169 targets to be achieved. As part of the 17 goals, we are expected to achieve 169 targets. And what did the government do? Government had realized that it is a very long drawn process. So the government had come out with a slogan saying that we have achieved everything. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. The government has said that it is achieved. So let us see. India's Human Development Index has improved significantly. It says that our HDI has improved significantly between 1990 and 2017. 1990 and 2017. In 1990 it was 0.427. 0.427. In 2017, 0.640. 0 means worst and 1 means best. We have improved from 427 to 0.64. But our ranking is still 130 of 189 countries. Our ranking is still 130 of 189 countries. Don't ask what are the countries above us. Even Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Rwanda, all those countries are above us. Next, what did the government do? The government had come out with this Sustainable Development Index for the state governments also, for the states also. It has come out with this what we call Human Development Index for the state governments also. And the states were ranked. Who are the states which have performed well? As we have said, Kerala, then Goa, Himachal Pradesh and Punjab. They are the 4 topmost states in terms of HDI. Kerala, Goa, Himachal Pradesh and Punjab. And what are the lowest ranked states? UP, Bihar and MP. These are the bottom. They are at the bottom. That is what they say. And then what else economic survey talks about it? It also talks about gender equality. One of the goals of sustainable development is gender equality. It is SDG 5, gender equality. And for gender equality, it says that the government has launched various schemes. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Ujjwala scheme, Poshan Abhiyan, Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandan Yojana. Do you know that all these schemes are there? You know? I can understand the problem of jobless growth. Otherwise, how do you know all these schemes? You have to read all these schemes for your prelims. That is the reason why you know them. Those people who are supposed to benefit out of them, they also don't know. And you know. So this is what. And then what else it says? And not much is there here. It has talked about so many of the schemes. Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bhima Yojana, Atal Pension Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bhima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Atal Bhim Ki Vyakti Kalyan Yojana. I don't know what is this one. Atal Bhimti Vyakti Kalyan Yojana. What is this? Yes, employment insurance. I like this kind of attitude. You study everything. You know, you know, you are going to be the SDG 18. Everyone should be like you. Right? How do people remember all these things? Right? And again, what I would suggest is that there is not much to discuss here. What I suggest is that you have to remember and mug up all these schemes, at least for your prelims. For mains also, they are focusing nowadays more on these things. One is skill development, second one is education, third one is health, fourth one is drinking water and sanitation, fifth one is this food quality and quantity of food. Next one is gender parity and gender development. All these things are part of social sector development, and I expect you to go through all of them, because there is no point in dictating all these things, because they are there in the survey. So from this, I think we can move on to the budget. What the budget has to say. We can move on to the budget. As I said, that whether a budget has provided solutions to all the problems that we have discussed. Yesterday we talked about 7-8 problems, the faced by India in terms of increasing its GDP and in terms of realizing its sustainable development goals. Let us see whether the budget has provided the solutions or not. So first and foremost, what we can say about this budget, what we can say about this budget is that this budget is based on what we popularly call it as incrementalism. It is based on what is called incrementalism. What do you mean by that? It means that the government is not in favor of any rapid or radical changes. It believes in making small changes which ensure continuity. That is the reason why people have said that this budget lacks what we call big ideas. There is no one big idea which it really attracts when you read the budget. And it is also good because incrementalism can be sustained for longer periods of time. On the other hand, if you come out with any revolutionary changes, it cannot you cannot ensure their success also. So first and foremost, we say that it is based on incrementalism. And budget has identified 10 important areas. It has talked about 10 important areas. First one is minimum government and maximum governance. It talked about minimum government and maximum governance. Second one is pollution free India. Pollution free India. That is what we say, green earth and blue skies. Green earth and blue skies. Third, digital India. Making digital India successful, so that it reaches each and every sector of economy. Digital India. The fourth thing that the budget has identified is space research. Gaganyaan, Chandrayaan, so that our Prime Minister can go to those places also. He is getting bored to going to America all the time, right? He can go there and seek investment from those people also. He is not going there for himself. Please try to understand. Next one is it focuses on building a physical and social infrastructure. Physical and social infrastructure. Next, water. Next important area, water and water management. Water management and clean rivers. Next, blue economy. Aquas and fisheries and everything. Blue economy. Next one is self-sufficiency and export of food grains. Self-sufficiency and export of food grains. And next one is Ayushman Bharat. Well-nourished women and children, not men. Okay. Ayushman Bharat. Next one is Ayushman Bharat. Last one is emphasis on MSMEs. Emphasis on MSMEs. These are the 10 points which we can say the budget will be focusing on. This is what the budget says. The vision document says that in the next 10 years, we will be focusing on these things. And of course, the most, these 10 points are what we call, are inside the cover. And what is there on the cover? $5 trillion economy by 2024-25. This is what the budget talked about. How to reach this $5 trillion economy by 2024 and 2025. So what did the budget do to realize this dream of a $5 trillion economy? As we have said that this is possible only with investment. This is only possible with investment. There is no other way you can grow without investment. But the problem is that the government has limited resources. As we keep on saying, government has limited resources. So what did the government do in the budget? What the government has been doing also in the last 4 years, consciously also, is it has opted for a what we call two-pronged strategy here. What is it? First one, the government will be spending on social infrastructure. On social infrastructure, whether it is whether spending money on all the flagship schemes of the government. Spending money on flagship schemes of the government, whether it is on education, health, rural development, everything else. And what the government expects is that the physical infrastructure should be taken care of by the private sector. This is the strategy of the government. Physical infrastructure will be taken care of by the private sector. The government will be spending on social infrastructure, and physical infrastructure will be taken care of by the private sector. This is what the strategy of the government as far as this year's budget is also concerned. The government expects the private sector to step up its investment to ensure rapid growth and development, whereas the government's finances will be mostly spent on social infrastructure. That is what the government has said. Now, coming back to the second part here, when we are talking about the private sector investment, we are talking about two things. One is domestic and foreign. Domestic and foreign. So in this year's budget, the government has given more importance to foreign sector. In this year's budget, the government has given more importance to foreign sector. How? It has, the government, what did the government do? It has allowed foreign investment in infrastructure industries, especially in civil aviation. It has allowed foreign investment in infrastructure, in civil aviation, and then infrastructure, insurance and media. Insurance and media. Because the objective is to attract more investment. And not only that, the government has said that government would allow FDI in mega manufacturing plants. Government would allow FDI in mega manufacturing plants, so that the private sector will be taking care of the concerns related to growth. For the domestic sector, for the domestic industries, what did the government do? What did the government do? Especially for the startups, the angel tax has been removed for the startups. If you want to avail of this angel tax, the scrutiny will be there, which results in more corruption also. That is the reason why the government has removed this scrutiny, so that the startups can have more avail of all the benefits also. On positively, this is what the government has done. Government has also eased the norms related to FPI also, foreign portfolio investment. It has eased the norms related to foreign portfolio investment also. And then to ensure more credit flow to the banks, because if banks have credit, then only they can give loans to the private sector. What the government has done is that it has allocated 70,000 crores. It has allocated 70,000 crores for recapitalization of banks. Recapitalization of banks. And then to solve this NBFC problem, government has allowed the banks to invest in these NBFCs, to buy the shares with the help of RBI. With the help of RBI. So that NBFCs also will have cash flows. Basically, the objective is to ensure there is more credit in the economy. When there is more credit, obviously the interest rates will come down, and cost of production will come down. It will become more attractive for domestic investors also. These are the measures that the government has taken. On the other hand, the government has to think about what we call socialistic objectives also. That is the reason why the government had come out with the super rich tax, income tax, super rich income tax. Of course, this has not gone down well with the stock markets. It did not go down well with the markets. 2,700 crores of rupees is what the government is expecting as a tax revenues with the tax on super rich people, 2,700 crores. And in the 3 days of stock exchange, 2,70,000 crores of rupees were lost. For 2,700 crores, you lost 2,70,000 crores. And this is one of the steps which the government has taken without looking at the consequences. And then, as I said, that government also focused on MSMEs. Government has said that they will provide liberal financial assistance to these MSMEs. What is the name of the program? Pradhan Mantri Karam Yogi Mandhan scheme. Karam Yogi Mandhan scheme. That is what the government has said. And next, what did the government do? What are the other big ticket ideas of this budget? What else the government has done? The next thing government has done is that it has given major push for infrastructure. Major push for infrastructure sector. Especially this rural roads, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, and then Bharat Mala 2 and Sagar Mala projects. Bharat Mala 2, Sagar Mala. Then it has started a new schemes, Jal Marg Vikas, and it has expanded Udan also. What is this Jal Marg Vikas? You know them, very good. I can see so much of desperation here. That is what, otherwise how do you people know all these things, Even finance minister, after writing this budget, she will sleep and she will not remember any of these things. Next, the government also has said that it requires 50 lakh crores of rupees for investment in railways between 2018 and 2030. We require 50 lakh crores of rupees. Obviously, the government does not have this kind of money. So, the government has said that the solution is public-private partnerships, PPP, public-private partnerships. Next, the government has said that as far as the road infrastructure is concerned, road sector is concerned, it has said that National Highway Program, a National Highway Development Program, it has been renamed as a National Highway Grid. National Highway Grid. What did they do? To make it financially viable for private investors. To make it financially viable for private investors. For this, the government has said that they will use hybrid annuity model as part of National Highway Grid project. Hybrid annuity model. This is one of the models of public-private partnership to make it sustainable over a period of time. Next, when it comes to the power sector, the government has said that the objective is one nation, one grid. One nation, one grid, by connecting all the grids, because surplus power from eastern part of the country can be used in rest of the country. One nation, one grid. And then this visual, this discom Uday is also there to reform the discoms, distribution companies. The government has said that this Uday also will be reformed. Changes would be made. Why? Because Uday scheme has not been as successful as it should have been in power sector. What happened? As part of the losses of these discoms, they have been transferred to another institution to reduce the fiscal deficit. Beyond that, nothing else has happened with Uday. Real power sector reforms means what? Real power sector reforms means you must end cross subsidization in the power sector. You must end cross subsidization. Power sector reforms, very important topic for this year, your economy. It will definitely be asked in your Indian economy as part of infrastructure. The cross subsidization must end. What is this cross subsidization that we are talking about in the power sector? Agriculture, we are giving free of cost. And to recover the losses from agriculture, we are imposing huge amount of tariff on industrial sector. Industrial sector, for commercial purposes, they are paying almost 13-14 rupees per unit. In agriculture, they get free of cost. And what is happening? When you are paying 14 rupees per unit, obviously your cost of production will increase. Your competitiveness also will come down. So, when you talk about power sector reforms, one country, one grid is fine, but most importantly, you must end cross subsidization. Next, you must end subsidies. Populistic subsidies. Almost every state government gives free electricity. That is what we say. Next one is, you must improve your T&D, transmission and distribution. You must reduce your T&D losses. And then in power sector, you must move towards green energy. That is, at present, as we discussed, 60% of our production comes from thermal power. And as part of the sustainable development goals, it should be 40%. These are all the reforms. But unfortunately, the government only in the budget talked about only one thing, that is one nation, one grid. Nothing else was talked about. Next, what else you find in budget? Next one is when it comes to financing, industrial financing, if you remember, while discussing about the financial sector, what was the problem? The problem was these NBFCs, they are only expected to give short-term loans. But these infrastructure companies and industries, they require long-term loans. So earlier what we had was, we had separate development financial institutions to provide long-term financial assistance to industries. Earlier we had separate development financial institutions. Like we had IDBI, Industrial Development Bank of India. We had ICICI. Now it has been converted into a bank. Earlier it was a financial institution. What is ICICI? Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. Then we had IFCI, Industrial Finance Corporation of India. Now suddenly all of them have been converted into banks, and the industry simply does not have any avenues to take long-term credit. That is the reason why they had approached NBFCs, resulting in the collapse of the financial system. So the government has said that as part of the budget, they would like to revive these financial institutions, development financial institutions. That is what the budget has said. They would like to revive, which is a very, very good step in the right direction. That is what the government has said. They would like to revive these development financial institutions with the objective of providing long-term financial to satisfy the long-term financial needs of industrial sector. The next thing, another crazy idea of the government is, they said that they will come out with a social stock exchange. Social stock exchange. What is this social stock exchange? What do the stock exchange do? You buy and sell shares of the companies in stock exchange. In social stock exchange, what happens? These NGOs and civil society organizations, they are working at the field level to improve the conditions of people. Most of the time they find problem with resources, especially financial resources. They don't have money. So what the government has said is that in order to ensure that these NGOs, civil society organizations have enough financial resources, they are coming out with a social stock exchange. They can be asked in the examination also. And what is the objective of the social stock exchange? They can register themselves here, NGOs and civil society organizations, and they can sell shares and equities so that they can raise finances. But who will buy them? They themselves will buy them. Okay. For example, if I am buying the shares of Reliance, why am I buying? Am I buying because I like Mukesh Ambani very much? No, because it is a profit-making company. If NGOs and civil societies organizations are registering themselves with the social stock exchange, who will buy the shares? Pardon? Who will buy the shares? Capitalists. Why will they buy it? As part of CSR, they will buy it. Okay, let us hope that that is what the government, another thing that they had come out with. Next, as I said, when it comes to taxation policies of the government, when it comes to tax policies of the government in the budget, the government cannot do anything with indirect taxes. They cannot do anything with indirect taxes. Why? Because now all these taxes have to be decided by the GST Council. All these indirect taxes have to be decided by the GST Council. That is the reason why budget is now never really talked about indirect taxes. The budget talked about the direct tax, income tax. As I said, what are the changes they have made? They have imposed tax on super rich people. But there is one positive change that they have made, which can be devastating for you people. if you get into IRS IT. Why? Now the government has made complete the process of filing of taxes and evaluation of your tax returns, everything completely impersonal. It has made digitalized the whole process. Complete digitalization of the process. I can see some of you are already getting heart attacks. Don't worry. The future can be good. It has completely digitalized the whole process, so that there is no scope for personal interaction, which is the major source of corruption. E-governance. This is what the government has done as far as this taxes are concerned. Next, what else did the government do to boost domestic consumption? To boost domestic consumption, what did the government do? Government has given tax benefits for those people who are buying houses. If the value of the house is below 45 lakhs, affordable housing, you will be given tax rebates. The deduction can be up to 1.5 lakh rupees on interest that you have paid. The objective is to boost domestic consumption, to revive the housing sector also. Similarly, to encourage the use of electric vehicles, the government has said that again 1.5 lakh rupees concession will be given for buying electric vehicles. And then, as we have discussed, angel tax. The government has what it has said, that it has resolved the problems related to angel tax. The startups need not comply with the norms. They can get all the benefits of angel tax without any conditions. Next, what did the government do? What are the other things that are there in the budget? And the next thing is that, as I said, in the banking sector, the government introduced reforms. What the government has said is that NPS of NPS of banks, public sector banks, had come down by 1 lakh crores in the last 1 year. NPS, that had come down by 1 lakh crores. And the banks have recovered, as I said, 4 lakh crores of rupees of NPS. Banks have recovered 4 lakh crores of rupees of NPS in the last 4 years. That is what, because at some place it was written as last 1 year, some place 4 years. Maybe if you read one more document, 40 years. Okay, so we will take it as 4 years. If they have recovered 4 lakh crores in the last 4 years, the NPS should have come down in the last 4 years, but they were maximum in 2017. But this is what the budget says. What can we do? We can only see. Next, as I said, next the thing is RBI was given the authority. RBI was given the authority to control NBFCs, non-banking financial companies. Next, as I said that the government needs money. Obviously, the estimates related to tax revenues are very less. The government has to look for non-tax revenues. What are the major sources of non-tax revenues the government has looked for in this budget? First one is RBI. The government estimated that this year RBI will give the government a dividend of 90,000 crores. Government is expecting the RBI to give a dividend of 90,000 crores. And then second measure is the government is expecting through disinvestment of public sector enterprise 1,05,000 crores. Through disinvestment of public sector enterprises, 1,05,000 crores. And the budget also has said that government again will start the process of strategic sale of Air India, strategic disinvestment of Air India. Strategic sale of 50. Government wanted to sell the Air India, but nobody wants to buy it because air is polluted, so is India. Okay. So that is what the problem is. Next, what else did the government say, regarding public sector enterprises? Government has said that government will have only 51% holdings in public sector enterprises. 51%. It is willing to sell rest of the stake in public sector enterprises so that the government can recover good amount of money. Next, the government is also focusing on what we call digital payments. Digital payments. How to encourage people to opt for digital payments? What the government has said is that any cash withdrawal exceeding 1 crore of rupees in an year, within a year, if you withdraw 1 crore of rupees from your bank accounts cash, that would be taxed. TDS will be 2%. The objective is to move from cash economy to digital economy. Digital economy. That is what the government has said. Next, apart from this, what is the road map for the future? What the government is talking about for the future? It has said that the objective is to implement structural reforms. Objective is to implement structural reforms to make administration efficient. What will the government do? By simplifying procedures, simplification of procedures, then incentivizing performance, then reducing red tape, then making use of technology, and finally accelerating mega programs and services. This is what the government has said that they would like to do as part of the budget. And criticism, I don't think we need to talk about it. What could be the criticism of the budget? The only criticism that we say about the budget is that the budget has not touched the structural problems facing the economy. It has not come out with any definitive measures to revive economy. And in fact, I forgot to tell you one more important point in the budget is the government has said that it will go for external borrowings. Till now, governments were extremely careful about external borrowings. So the government has said that to finance its expenditure, capital expenditure, it will go for external borrowings. Why? Why the government has said that it will go for external borrowings? First reason is the rate of interest is very less. I said that in German markets, rate of interest is negative. In America, 1%. So if you are taking loans from foreign countries, almost the rate of interest is almost zero. The low cost of credit. Second reason is it will not result in crowding out of investment. It will not result in crowding out of investment. Crowding out of investment. And the government has said that in the next 5 years, they would like to invest 100 lakh crores in infrastructure sector. 100 lakh crores in infrastructure. This is the objective of the government. 100 lakh crores in infrastructure sector in the next 5 years. And they said that they would like to finance it with the help of these external borrowings. External borrowings. This is one of the definitely very good ideas. But what is the problem with these external borrowings? What is the problem? Exchange rate volatility. Exchange rate volatility. The money, the rupee component of the debt will be very high. You require huge amount of foreign exchange also. Exchange rate volatility, which can result in pressure on our exchange rate, resulting in depreciation also. But what the government is saying is that now we don't have to worry about this because we have good amount of foreign exchange reserves. We have good amount of foreign exchange reserves. So this is what one of the what you call the brighter ideas of this budget, external borrowings, to make use of the conditions that are prevailing at the global level now. Why? Because at the global level the rate of interest is very less. And then as we have said that the basic issue with the budget is that the government has not come out with any definitive measures to revive the economy. Second problem is that as usual agriculture was completely neglected. Agriculture, government has not done anything for agriculture. Only in the interim budget that was presented before the elections talked about agriculture. After elections are over, farmers have become farmers. Farmer, they have. Again the government will remember them after 5 years. The government has not come out with any specific measures to tackle low productivity and agrarian crisis. It has not talked about those things. That is what we have said. And of course, another criticism is that if you want to revive consumption, savings and investment, you must put more money in the hands of the people. And what did the government do? Government increased the petroleum and the diesel prices. And when the government increased petroleum diesel prices, 70,000 crores of rupees will go out of the system. 70,000 crores of rupees. If you take a Keynesian multiplier, then what happens? At least 5 to 10 times of that demand will come down in the market. That is what the government has done. It has increased the petroleum and the diesel prices. Basically, the petroleum and diesel prices have been increased to finance the mega schemes of the government. And of course, it will have definitely negative impact. Why? Because income in the hands of people will be very less, disposable income. And it will impact your aggregate demand also. And then in the banking sector also, government has talked about 70,000 crores of rupees recapitalization of banks, which is good. But it must improve the functioning of banks. What is the point of putting so much amount of money in the public sector banks without improving their functioning? That also the government did not. Again, the government also has not talked about the effectiveness of these regulatory mechanisms. Where it is RBI. RBI has failed in regulating the commercial banks. Now RBI has given the additional responsibility of NBFCs also. So these are the things which which have escaped the attention of our finance minister. So this is what about the budget. As I said that what you have to remember. What I will do is that maybe in 1 or 2 days I will mark the important pages from both the parts of economic survey. What are the important? Because the first part has around how many pages? Yeah, 213 pages, and the second part has around how many? Yeah, 280 pages. 280, 220, 500 pages. obviously it will be difficult for you. Some of you have studied SDG 18, some of you have studied. But for those of you who cannot study, I will mark the important pages where you have to read all of them. You can only read those pages. That I will put it here in 1 or 2 days time.
Important statistics as well.
Important statistics. In fact, I will be giving this. After the class, you will be getting them. Yeah. In fact, the government itself had given all these things, so I don't have to duplicate the work. So that is enough, more than enough. I think. I hope I have addressed most of your problems. If you have any doubts, you can ask related to economic survey or budget or anything like that. Or if you cannot ask any doubts now, you can always call me and you can ask me with your doubts. Because yesterday also finance minister, she has given the same kind of offer for members of parliament. Because when she was talking about the numbers, opposition parties have complained that the finance minister is acting like a teacher, school teacher, controlling the children, school children. The opposition party member says that no, we are not children, and she says that you may not be children, but I am a teacher, and I will control you. And she said that if you still have any doubts, you can come to my room number 36, and you can clear all your doubts also regarding the statistics. So what you can do is that you can also always call me if you have any kind of doubts reading economic survey or budget. You can always call me. You can take my number and you can call me. This is my number, 9911 366 520. Unlike finance minister, I am slightly busy also, so you can call me in the evening time between 7 to 10. I will clarify your doubts. If you don't have any doubts, you can still call me. I will create doubts in your mind and then clarify them. Right? So that is it. That is more than enough. And I will also, for those who will be writing mains, I will also be giving important questions, especially from economy. They are asking 10 questions. I will also give only 10 questions. The only difference that UPSC will make is they change the order of the questions. And if I give first, they will give fifth, so that they can show their creativity also. So otherwise, it is very easy to predict the questions and everything else. Right? Best of luck.
Every year in mains, we are getting questions from budget, and every year the question is the key core of questions. For example, for